The neon lights of downtown flickered against the autumn rain as Lily hurried across the slick pavement, clutching her worn backpack tightly against her chest. Her scholarship barely covered tuition, leaving her working double shifts at the campus coffee shop just to afford her tiny apartment. She'd only stepped into First National Bank to deposit her paycheck when she saw it happen. A young woman in designer clothes being forced into a black SUV outside the bank's glass doors. No one else seemed to notice, the busy street continuing its rhythmic dance of hurried footsteps. The designer purse lay abandoned on the wet sidewalk, its contents scattered across the concrete. Lily picked it up instinctively, her fingers trembling as she gathered the spilled items. Lipstick, keys, and a sleek leather wallet that felt heavier than anything she'd ever owned. Inside the wallet, behind a driver's license bearing the name Camila Delgado, was a business card unlike any Lily had seen. Heavy black cardstock with no logo, no address, just a phone number embossed in silver and, in case of emergency, handwritten on the back. Something about the card made her spine straighten, a feeling that whatever had happened to the young woman was far bigger and more dangerous than a simple mugging. The rain fell harder now, soaking through Lily's thin jacket as she stared at the number. With shaking fingers, she punched the number into her cracked phone screen, each digit feeling like a step further away from the safe, predictable life she'd carefully constructed. 3 rings later, a voice answered, deep, commanding, with the kind of authority that made her breath catch. "Who is this?" The voice wasn't loud, but it carried power that made Lily's knees weaken as she leaned against the brick wall of a nearby alley. She struggled to find words, suddenly aware of how small her voice sounded. I found your card," Lily stammered, water dripping from her soaked hair into her eyes. "In a wallet belonging to Camilla, I think. I just saw her being taken, forced into a black SUV outside First National on Madison Avenue." The silence that followed stretched so long that Lily wondered if the call had dropped, but then the voice returned, colder now, harder, carrying an edge that made her blood turn to ice. "Where are you exactly? Don't move." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she described the corner where she stood, trapped between fear and the inexplicable feeling that she'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The distant wail of sirens mixed with the drumming rain. "Stay exactly where you are," the voice commanded. "Tell no one else what you saw. Touch nothing else in that purse." The line went dead before Lily could respond, leaving her alone with the rain and a growing sense of dread. Within minutes, black cars appeared at both ends of the street, moving with the precision of predators. Men in dark suits emerged despite the downpour, and at their center walked a figure who seemed to command the very air around him. He moved through the rain-slicked street like he owned not just the ground beneath his feet, but the sky above it, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through dark hair at his temples. His face bore the kind of weathered handsomeness that spoke of years lived hard but well. The man's eyes found Lily immediately, as if he'd known exactly where she would be standing, and she felt herself being assessed in the span of a heartbeat. Not just her appearance, her soaked university sweatshirt and worn jeans, but something deeper, as if he could read her very thoughts. "The purse," he said simply, extending a hand that bore a single gold signet ring. No introduction, no questions about who she was, or how she'd found herself involved in whatever dangerous game was unfolding. Lily handed it over wordlessly, watching as he examined it with clinical precision. His hands were strong but surprisingly elegant, checking the contents with methodical care until he found what he was looking for, a small tracking device sewn into the lining. "My daughter," he said finally, looking back at Lily with eyes that contained both rage and vulnerability in equal measure. "You saw who took her?" His voice had softened fractionally, though the power behind it remained. 3 men, Lily replied, finding her courage despite the hammering of her heart. They wore masks, but one had a tattoo on his hand, a red snake coiling around his wrist. The car had no plates. Something flashed in the man's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or confirmation of a fear. He gestured to one of his men, who immediately pulled out a phone and stepped away, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. "My name is Daniel Blackwell," he said, studying her face with unsettling intensity. "And you are now in possession of information that makes you either very valuable or very dangerous to me." Lily swallowed hard, rainwater running down her neck, despite the shelter of the awning they now stood under. "I'm just a student. I don't want any trouble. I just thought someone should know what happened to her." Daniel's expression shifted subtly, the hard lines around his mouth softening for just a moment. A student with a conscience. Rare enough these days. He glanced at her worn backpack, the textbooks visible through the half-open zipper. "You have two choices, miss." He paused, clearly waiting for her to fill in the blank, which she did with trembling breath. "Miss Taylor, you can walk away right now, forget everything you've seen, and pray that the men who took my daughter don't realize you witnessed it." He stepped closer, close enough that Lily could smell the expensive cologne that clung to his immaculate suit despite the rain. "Or you can come with me, tell me everything you saw in detail, and allow me to ensure your safety until this situation is resolved." The interior of Daniel's car smelled of leather and subtle cologne as they sped through rain-slicked streets. Lily sat rigidly on the edge of the seat, clutching her backpack like a shield while the city blurred past tinted windows. "The men who took Camila," Daniel said, breaking the tense silence, "belonged to the Viper Syndicate, my most bitter rivals." His jaw tightened as he studied a photo on his phone, security footage from across the street showing the abduction. A man in the front seat turned to face them. "Mr. Blackwell, we've confirmed it's Ramirez's crew. The snake tattoo matches his lieutenant." His tone carried the precision of military training beneath its respectful surface. Daniel nodded once, then fixed his gaze on Lily. "My daughter was supposed to be under protection. 2 guards who have now disappeared." Something in his expression shifted, revealing a father beneath the intimidating exterior. "You're not just a businessman, are you?" Lily whispered, the reality of her situation finally crystallizing. The expensive suits, the men with concealed weapons, the air of absolute authority, it all pointed to one conclusion. Daniel studied her face for a long moment. "I control shipping routes along the eastern seaboard, legal and otherwise." The admission hung between them like smoke, neither apology nor threat, simply fact. The car turned into an underground garage beneath a towering high-rise, coming to a stop in a private section cordoned off from other vehicles. "My enemies think taking my daughter gives them leverage to negotiate new territorial agreements." Lily's economics professor had once mentioned how organized crime operated like shadow corporations, with mergers and hostile takeovers executed through violence instead of paperwork. This was that theory made flesh, sitting beside her. "They don't know you witnessed the abduction," Daniel continued. "That gives us an advantage. You saw details their security cameras couldn't capture." He handed her a tablet with a database of faces. The screen showed dozens of men, organized by rank and specialization. "If you can identify any of them, it narrows our search." Daniel's voice had softened to something almost gentle. Lily scrolled through the images, focusing despite the fear clouding her thoughts. On the 4th screen, she froze. Him. He was driving the SUV. The face belonged to a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Daniel's expression darkened with recognition. "Carlos Mendez, Ramirez's top enforcer." He nodded to his men, who immediately began making calls. "They've taken her to one of 3 possible locations. We move tonight." The penthouse apartment was nothing like Lily had imagined a mobster's hideout would be. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while modern furniture and soft lighting created an atmosphere of understated luxury. "You'll stay here until this is resolved," Daniel said, loosening his tie as he poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into crystal glasses. "My men will ensure your safety while we locate Camila." Lily accepted the offered drink with trembling fingers, the weight of her new reality settling over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. "Why did you bring me here instead of just asking questions at the scene?" Daniel's gaze was steady, assessing. "Because the moment you called that number, you became either an asset or a liability in this war." He gestured toward the rain-spattered windows. "Out there, you'd be dead by morning." The apartment fell silent save for the distant sound of security teams communicating through earpieces in the hallway. Lily took a small sip, the whiskey burning a path down her throat like liquid courage. "Camila is my only family," Daniel said suddenly, his voice quieter than before. "Her mother died when she was 12, breast cancer that spread before we caught it." He stared into his glass, as if seeing ghosts in the amber liquid. Something in his vulnerability made Lily brave enough to ask the question burning in her mind. "How does someone become what you are? Was it always this way for you?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was pre-law at Columbia, working nights as a bouncer to pay tuition." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faded scar running from wrist to elbow, until I stopped the wrong man from harassing the wrong woman. That woman had been the daughter of Anthony Delgado, the previous head of the organization, a fact Daniel revealed with surprising candor. "He offered me a job with better pay than any law firm, and a different kind of justice than courts provide." Hours passed as they talked, the initial tension between them gradually thawing. Daniel spoke of his daughter with undisguised pride, her academic achievements, her talent for languages, her plans for graduate school. Lily found herself sharing too. Her scholarship, her dreams of becoming a financial analyst, the sacrifices her single mother had made to get her this far. She works 2 nursing jobs to help with what my scholarship doesn't cover. Daniel studied her with new interest. You crossed a dangerous line today for a stranger. His voice carried something beyond mere curiosity. Most people would have walked away, pretended they saw nothing. As midnight approached, the penthouse door opened and a man in a tailored suit entered, his expression grave. We've confirmed Camilla's location. The warehouse at the old shipyard. Security is heavy. At least 15 armed men. Daniel's transformation was immediate, the father vanishing behind the calculated mask of a strategist. Prepare 2 teams. Silent entry through both access points. His eyes met Lily's with unexpected gentleness. Try to rest. This ends tonight. Dawn broke over the city in shades of pink and gold when Lily woke to the sound of voices in the living room. She crept to the door, heart pounding as she made out fragments of intense conversation about ransom demands and exchange locations. Daniel stood at the center of the room, commanding his lieutenants with the precision of a military general. They want $5 million in untraceable cryptocurrency and exclusive rights to the Brighton Beach territory. The plan they outlined made Lily's blood run cold. A midnight exchange at an abandoned marina, with Camilla transferred between boats while snipers positioned on both shores ensured no betrayal. The casual discussion of potential casualties was surreal. The silence that followed Lily's suggestion hung heavy in the air as Daniel's lieutenants exchanged skeptical glances. No civilian had ever inserted themselves into an operation before. The unwritten rules of their world kept outsiders firmly beyond the boundaries of their conflicts. Lily's economics professor had once lectured about calculated risk versus perceived danger, how human instinct often misinterpreted probability during high-stakes scenarios. This knowledge gave her the courage to stand before these dangerous men and offer what they'd never consider themselves. Daniel dismissed his men with a subtle gesture, waiting until the door closed behind the last of them before turning back to Lily. You understand what you're risking, that these men won't hesitate to kill you if they discover your purpose. The wall behind Daniel displayed surveillance photos of the Viper Syndicate's key members, men with hollow eyes and trigger fingers who viewed human life as merely collateral in their power struggles. Yet somehow, standing in this penthouse with this dangerous man, Lily felt an inexplicable sense of purpose. There's another way, Lily said suddenly, stepping into the room. All eyes turned toward her, some surprised, others calculating. I could be your advantage. They don't know I exist. Daniel's expression darkened immediately. Absolutely not. You're a civilian, not a chess piece in this game. But something in his eyes, a flicker of consideration, told Lily he was already seeing the strategic potential. Lily stood her ground. I'm studying game theory. This is a classic asymmetric information problem. She approached the table where maps and building schematics were spread. They don't know what you know. We can use that. Hours later, as afternoon faded into evening, the plan was set. Lily would pose as a yacht club employee, placing a tracking device on the Viper's boat before the exchange, allowing Daniel's team to follow after the initial meeting. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you abort, Daniel instructed, his hands gripping her shoulders with unexpected gentleness. Your life is worth more than any tactical advantage. The concern in his eyes seemed to transcend strategy. The weight of the tiny tracking device in Lily's pocket felt impossibly heavy as she walked along the marina boardwalk at 11:30 that night. Her heart hammered against her ribs with each step toward the sleek black speedboat. Excuse me, she called to the men preparing the vessel, her voice steadier than she felt. The harbor master asked me to verify all boats planning midnight departures. She held up the clipboard Daniel's team had provided. The man who approached had cold eyes that reminded Lily of a shark. Emotionless, predatory, assessing. We've already cleared with management. His hand moved subtly toward his waistband, where Lily glimpsed the outline of a weapon. New policy after last week's theft, Lily improvised, forcing a casual shrug. Just need your signature and slip number. As she handed him the clipboard, she stumbled slightly, brushing against the boat's hull and pressing the tracker into place. Everything happened at once. A flash of recognition in the man's eyes, a shout from further down the dock, and the sudden appearance of Daniel emerging from shadows with a gun drawn. Run! He shouted to Lily, his voice cutting through the night air. The first bullet struck the wooden planks near her feet as Lily sprinted toward the cover of the boathouse. Behind her, the staccato rhythm of gunfire erupted across the previously quiet marina, shattering the night's silence. Strong hands pulled Lily behind a stack of wooden crates as bullets splintered the dock around them. Daniel's body shielded hers, his breathing steady despite the chaos erupting across the marina. "They knew we were coming," he whispered, the realization dawning in his voice like ice forming on water. "Someone inside my organization tipped them off. The ambush was waiting before we arrived." Shouts echoed across the water as Daniel's men exchanged fire with the Vipers, the flash of gunfire illuminating the night in strobing bursts. "We need to move. Now," Daniel urged, guiding Lily toward a secondary dock. A sleek speedboat waited in the shadows, its engine purring quietly as Daniel helped Lily aboard. Within seconds, they were slicing through dark waters, leaving the firefight behind as they headed toward the opposite shore. "What about your men?" Lily asked, her voice barely audible over the engine and the wind whipping her hair. "What about Camilla? We can't just leave them." Daniel's expression was grim in the moonlight. "My daughter wasn't there. It was a setup from the beginning." He navigated the boat with practiced skill, taking them deeper into the network of industrial canals. "How can you be sure?" Lily pressed, clinging to the side rail as they took a sharp turn. The city lights receded behind them, replaced by the looming shadows of abandoned warehouses. "Because this was never about ransom or territory," Daniel replied, cutting the engine as they drifted into a hidden boathouse. "This was about eliminating me, and using Camilla as bait was the perfect lure." They abandoned the boat and moved through a series of back alleys, Daniel's hand never leaving the small of Lily's back as he guided her through the urban labyrinth. His phone buzzed with encrypted messages from surviving team members. They reached a forgotten subway maintenance tunnel, the entrance concealed behind a rusted utility door that groaned in protest as Daniel forced it open. The passage beyond smelled of damp concrete and distant trains, a hidden network beneath the city streets. "My father showed me these tunnels when I was 16, Daniel explained, his voice echoing slightly as they navigated by flashlight. "He said a smart man always has an escape route that doesn't appear on any map." Lily studied Daniel's profile in the dim light. The hard angles of his face softened with fatigue and worry for his daughter. The dangerous criminal from newspaper headlines had transformed into something more complex with each passing hour. The tunnel opened into an abandoned station platform, its mosaic tiles from another era still visible beneath decades of grime and neglect. "Only 3 people knew about this place," Daniel said, his voice tight with the implication. "Myself, Camilla, and Robert. Thomas is dead," Daniel said quietly, reading the latest update. "He was my head of security for 15 years. The loss reflected in his eyes, revealing that even in this world, loyalty meant something." Lily stopped suddenly, a terrible thought crystallizing. The tracker. What if they found it? What if they're following us right now? Her voice trembled with the weight of potential responsibility. Daniel pulled her into an empty doorway, his face inches from hers. "The betrayal came from inside, Lily. Someone close to me. Someone who knew about you, about the plan, about everything." His whispered words carried the weight of dawning realization. "And I think I know who." Dawn broke over the abandoned steel mill as Daniel's remaining loyal men took positions around the perimeter. Lily watched from a broken window as vehicles arrived one by one, parking in a loose semicircle. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, her breath fogging the cold glass. "What if you're wrong about Robert being the traitor?" The name belonged to Daniel's second-in-command, his business partner of 20 years. Daniel checked his weapon with practiced efficiency, his movements betraying none of the emotion Lily had glimpsed during their hours in hiding. The evidence all points to him. Access to schedules, security protocols, the location of safe houses. The plan was simple but dangerous. Daniel would confront Robert directly, using Lily's testimony about the kidnapping as leverage to force a confession. The remaining loyal soldiers would ensure no one escaped if things went wrong. "I still don't understand why you're risking this," Lily said quietly. "You could disappear, start over somewhere else. You have the resources." Her concern surprised even herself. Daniel's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "Because my daughter deserves to know her father fought for her, that I didn't run when it mattered most." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities neither had dared acknowledge. Lily found herself reaching for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his before she could question the impulse. "When this is over," Daniel said softly, "whatever happens today, I want you to know that meeting you changed everything." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and unexpected. Camilla's photo appeared on Robert's phone screen as he held it up, The young woman looked exhausted but unharmed, a newspaper dated that morning visible beside her. She always liked you, Daniel. Trusted you without question, just like her mother did. The mention of Camilla's mother changed something in Daniel's stance, a subtle shift that transformed potential energy to kinetic. You were there when Helena died, held my hand at her funeral, and promised to always protect our family. A flash of movement at the periphery caught Lily's attention. Daniel's remaining loyal men taking strategic positions around the mill floor, weapons drawn but waiting for the signal. The betrayer hadn't noticed, his attention fixed on Daniel's controlled rage. The organization needs new leadership, Daniel, Robert continued, oblivious to the shifting dynamics around him. The old ways, your ways, are becoming obsolete. Camilla understands this better than you do. Before Lily could respond, the door to the main floor opened. Robert entered surrounded by 4 armed men, his expression shifting from confidence to shock when he spotted Lily standing beside Daniel. The student witness, Robert said, recovering quickly. I'm surprised she's still alive. Loose ends aren't usually your style, Daniel. The false concern in his voice couldn't mask the calculation in his eyes. Daniel stepped forward, keeping his body between Lily and the newcomers. Where is my daughter, Robert? Where is Camilla? The question carried all the quiet menace of a drawn blade. Robert's smile never reached his eyes. Safe, for now, though her continued well-being depends entirely on you signing over control of the organization to me. He gestured to one of his men, who produced a tablet with documents prepared. 20 years as my right hand wasn't enough, Daniel asked, his voice dangerously soft. You had to take my daughter too. Something shifted in the air around them, tension crystallizing into the moment before violence erupts. The countryside blurred past the car windows, rolling hills and autumn foliage replacing the urban landscape Lily had known her entire life. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at the steel mill. 3 days of debriefings, evidence handovers, and quiet conversations about what comes next. Are you sure about this? Camilla asked from the front passenger seat, turning to look at Lily. The young woman had her father's eyes, perceptive, intelligent, missing nothing despite her ordeal. Lily nodded, still processing everything that had happened. Robert's confession extracted at gunpoint, Camilla rescued from an isolated cabin in the mountains, and the organization dismantled from within. The FBI had been given enough evidence to arrest key players, including the leaders of the Viper Syndicate. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the center console where Lily's fingers occasionally brushed against his. The domesticity of the gesture seemed surreal after the violence they'd survived together. 3 black SUVs had followed them for the first 100 miles, Daniel's remaining loyal lieutenants ensuring their former boss reached safety before dispersing to their own new lives. The convoy had gradually peeled away at predetermined points, their absence symbolic of ties being severed. A manila envelope on the back seat contained their new documentation: passports, driver's licenses, birth certificates, creating a paper trail for identities unburdened by their respective pasts. The names felt foreign on Lily's tongue, but promised a freedom neither had experienced before. Lily's mother had wept when they'd explained everything, not from fear as expected, but from understanding born of her own difficult choices as a single parent. You found someone who sees you, she'd told Lily during their final phone call. That's rarer than you know. The FBI agent who'd brokered their immunity deal had given them one final warning. Certain rivals might never stop looking, might never believe Daniel had truly walked away. Their safety depended on disappearing completely, leaving no threads to unravel. The property belonged to my mother's family, Daniel explained as they turned onto a private road lined with ancient maple trees. It's been in a trust for years. No connections to my former business interests. The farmhouse that emerged around the final curve was nothing like Lily had imagined. Warm stone and weathered wood, with wide porches and windows that caught the afternoon sunlight. It looked like something from a different life entirely. The university agreed to let you complete your degree remotely, Daniel said, pulling to a stop in the gravel driveway. And your mother arrives tomorrow. Her nursing license transfers to this state without additional certification. Lily stepped out of the car, breathing in air that smelled of apples and wood smoke instead of exhaust and concrete. What will you do now? She asked as Daniel joined her, his hand finding hers with newfound familiarity. Start over, he said simply. Use what legitimate investments remain to build something honest. The weight of his former life seemed to lift from his shoulders with each passing mile from the city. Camilla carried bags toward the house, giving them a moment alone. The authorities accepted our deal. testimony in exchange for immunity. The recording from the mill gave them everything they needed on Robert and the Vipers. Daniel turned to face Lily fully, his hands cradling her face with a gentleness that still surprised her. I've lived my entire adult life by certain rules, power, control, never showing vulnerability. His voice softened. You changed all of that. Lily rose on her tiptoes, closing the distance between them. Their kiss held the promise of something neither had dared hope for: redemption, forgiveness, a future written in their own terms, rather than dictated by the past. As sunset painted the countryside in gold, 3 people who had been strangers a week ago sat on the porch of their new beginning. The family they were forming, unexpected, imperfect, but fiercely protective of one another, was perhaps the greatest evidence that even in the darkest circumstances, light could find its way through. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching this story from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is important for me to continue here.